Happy Black History Month. It's your girl Akila, and I am doing a special project, a little special Black History project. I've chosen some names at random, but they kind of weirdly grouped together. You'll see once I'm all finished, but I'll be sharing some journal entries. I'll be doing something a little... Just feel my vibe on this whole thing, okay? Alright, buckle up. Let's go. So again, why am I doing profiles on Black people during Black History Month? Duh. No, kidding. Because I feel it's my duty to not only educate myself, but my nieces and nephews, for they're not being taught about themselves in school, especially in Florida, where the governor seems to think it lacks educational value. And if they do get taught Black history, it's the likes of Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, W. Du Bois, the usual cast. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Black people in America, our roots in this country are deep, and they go way back, as you'll see. We're living in a time where DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusive programs, are being systematically stripped away in education and employment because, check this out, the critics suggest that such programs provide means for marginalized groups, such as minorities and women, people of color, gay people, to be viewed and treated differently, and tax dollars should not be provided for such programs. Okay, reality check. Why did DEI, or affirmative action, need to be introduced in the first place? Because y'all weren't hiring Black people, gay people, women, people of color. And let's keep it G. Straight white men, you guys have a form of affirmative action. They're called legacy clubs. They're called golf clubs. You get my drift. There was no one in the room to speak that language. I will speak the language. I will tell the stories, mention names, and personalize the faces of Black men and women whose contributions to this country deserve far more credit than just a month in February. So, regardless of whether critics want to diminish it, hide it, or just erase it from the books entirely, you will find that you can't run from the truth. The truth always has a way of revealing its light. Let me conclude this project of love, reflection, education, and hope by stating this. I intentionally set out to research just a few of the names that helped birth this country into what it is today, starting with some of the patriots. Black people as a whole did not mythicize the narrative of this country, for if we did, we certainly would not contend that Europeans discovered, cultivated, and fought for the Republic to establish the democracy all by themselves. Black people were there as well. Black people were there from the beginning, and time does not account for the numerous names excluded from the books. The ancestors of old contributed more to this nation and society than history will ever dare to give them credit for. Black history is American history, and we continue to make history every day. People are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them, quoted James Baldwin. The fight for equal representation in the telling of this nation continues, especially in education. The powers that be do not want you to know who you are, where you came from, and where you have the potential to go. That's why they distract you with entertainment while programming you, trying to influence you on who you ought to be. Over time, there have been several ideations of the concept know thyself. The best saying I found is contributed to Akhenaten. Know thyself as the pride of his creation, the link uniting divinity and matter. Behold a part of God himself within you. Remember your own dignity. nor dare descend to evil or meanness. One of the reasons I love learning history is that it tells a story of mankind and how we have related to each other over the span of time. Culturally, linguistically, religiously. And yes, we war with each other and bicker, and yes, we are selfish and greedy. But the hope is to learn from the past so you don't make the same mistakes over and over and over again. To know yourself, you must know your history.
I was wondering about our yesterdays and digging through the rubble. And to say the least, somebody went to a hell of a lot of trouble to make sure that when we looked things up, we wouldn't fare too well. And we would come up with totally unreliable pictures of ourselves. But I've compiled what few facts I could, such as they are, to see if we could find out a little bit of something. And this is what I got so far. First, white folks discovered Africa. They claimed it fair and square. Cecil Rhodes couldn't have been robbing nobody because, hell, there wasn't nobody there. And white folks brought all the civilization because there wasn't none around. How could the folks be civilized when wasn't nobody writing nothing down? And just to prove all of their suspicions, well, didn't take too long. They found out that there were whole tribes of people in plain sight running around with no clothes on. That's right. The men, the women, the young, and the old righteous folks covered their eyes. And no time was spent considering the environment. Hell no, this just wasn't civilized. And another piece of information they had, or at least this is what we were taught, is that unlike the civilized people of Europe, these tribal units actually fought. And yes, there was some crude implements, and yes, there was primitive art. And yes, they were masters of hunting and fishing, and courtesy came from the heart. And yes, there was love and medicine, religion, intertribal communication by drum, but no paper, no pencils, and no other utensils. And hell, these folks never even heard of a gun. And this is why the colonies came, to stabilize the land, because the dark continent had copper and gold, and the discoverers had themselves a plan. They would discover all the places with promise. You didn't need no titles and deeds. Then they would appoint people to make everything legal, to sanction the trickery and greed. And back in the jungle, when the natives got restless, they would call it guerrilla attack. And they would never describe that the folks finally got wise and decided that they would fight back. And still, we are victims of word games. Semantics is always a bitch. Places once referred to as underdeveloped are now called mineral rich. And the game goes on eternally. Unity kept just beyond reach. Egypt and Libya used to be in Africa. They've now been moved to the Middle East. There are examples galore, I assure you. But if interpreting were left up to me, I'd be sure every time folks knew this version wasn't mine, which is why it is called his story.